Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. Many of us have been active feminists since the 70s or even the 60s, and were not surprised when this new attack on women came along, the gender identity ideology. And we have not changed our analysis. In 2018, we wrote a declaration on women's sex-based rights, which lays out our position, and it's been signed by 39,372 people from 160 countries and is supported by 553 organizations from all over the world. And this 2018 document we've never received a criticism about the declaration. About the words of the declaration or any of the ideas in the declaration, which is pretty good going, I would say. So it's definitely worth reading, and it's been very, very helpful for lots of us and lots of policymakers to get a position that is very, very sort of watertight defending women's sex-based rights. To promote the declaration and sex-based rights for women, we have volunteer activists, including country contacts from every continent. So do join us. And we've got some tasks that it would be great. We really haven't got anybody doing much social media at the moment. So if you could help us with social media, that would be really amazing. Today, our programme is, we have 4 speakers. We have Silvia Benussi from Italy, and she's going to tell us, give us a talk, Women's Rights in Italy, Between a Rock and a Hard Place. Then we're going to hear from Angela Wild, who's from UK, France, what Wild Women Workshop can do for you, and tell us about her creative process and what the workshop does and some of the great things that she's doing there. Then we're going to hear from Amparo Domingo, and she's from Spain. She's going to give us a report from Bilbao on a feminist event in reaction to conference promoting the transing of kids. And she's there live now, so we'll jump on after half an hour or so. And then our final speaker will be Blandine Deverlanges from France. And she's going to give us a speech, Freedom of Speech and Ideological Harassment, a response to an attempt at censorship. Our first speaker is Silvia Benussi. So thank you so much, Silvia, for coming. Silvia Benussi is the professor, or a professor, of the history of political institutions at the University of Cagliari, Italy. She worked on the presence of women in parliaments and local administrations in Italy and abroad, and is currently studying institutional language in Italy and Spain. She's a member of Tertulia Feminista Les Comadres, Gijón, Spain.
I chose this title, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, because women's rights in Italy currently face 2 challenges. The threat posed by the government that took office in October 2022, which is supported by a coalition of right-wing parties on the one hand, and on the other hand, the fact that the left-wing parties in opposition are promoting policies that are also a threat to women's rights. What are the actors at play? The coalition that won the elections in September 2022 is made up of several parties, the most important of which are now Fratelli d'Italia, which is the party that had the most support in the election under the leadership of Giorgia Meloni, now president of the Council of Ministers, and La Lega. There are minor parties as well, and I will not dwell on them. Forza Italia, well, is not exactly a minor party, but I will dwell on Fratelli d'Italia and La Lega. Both are recently formed parties, but they have previous roots. La Lega was born 35 years ago as a party for the independence of a part of northern Italy. However, in recent years, this approach has radically changed. In fact, it has made Italianism, especially as opposed to immigration, one of its fundamental political themes. We can call it a right-wing populist party. Fratelli d'Italia is a party born in 2012, but it follows the tradition of previous parties that were heirs of fascism. The Italian constitution prohibits the reconstitution of the fascist party. However, since the birth of the Democratic Republic, there has been parties which gathered the political identity of those who felt nostalgic for fascism. Fratelli d'Italia, so, is a nationalist and conservative party. On the other hand, we have the opposition consisting of a center-left coalition of several parties and more fragmented within itself. The main left-wing party is the Partito Democratico, born in 2007 from the union between the I Democratici di Sinistra and La Margherita. The I Democratici di Sinistra had roots in the dissolved Italian Communist Party, but they had already moved towards reformist positions in the 1990s, while La Margherita had its roots in left-wing Catholicism. Now, in addition to the Partito Democratico, which has these two souls, one in social democracy and the other in leftist Catholicism, the center-left opposition comprises several other minor parties. The leader of the Democratic Party is also a woman, Elise Schlein. Outside this coalition, there was another electoral list, Azione Italia Viva, a Centris One, which brings together two small parties with their origins on the left. Finally, a party that has gained support outside of the left-right identity is the Movimento 5 Stelle, which was born in 2009 and is strongly populist. It presents itself as a movement that rose out of indignation against the corruption and inadequacy of the political class. In the past, has allied itself with both the right and the left. This premise was necessary to get to the point that interests us most, to see how none of these forces guarantees women's rights. None of these political parties has a good program or a good will to protect women's rights, nor has a political culture that recognizes the oppression that women suffer based on their sex. Actually, all political parties represent a real danger to women's rights. For the sake of time, I will dwell only on a few issues that I consider especially important. The issue that has caused the most stir is the new law about surrogacy. In October 2024, Italian Parliament passed the law extending abroad the ban on surrogacy, which has existed in Italy since 2004. This law was strongly desired by the Giorgia Meloni government, above all by the Minister for the Family, Birth and Equal Opportunities, Eugenia Roccella, who was part of the feminist movement in the 1970s and then moved towards conservative positions. The spirit of the law undoubtedly responds to a traditional view of the family, women and motherhood. However, let's read the bill's accompanying report. We can see that it includes, correctly, I leave to the side some errors, for example, the reference to India, it includes a denunciation of this practice of the surrogacy as, quote, an execrable example of the commercialization of the female body and of the children who are born through such practices, who are treated like commodities. And so it defines surrogacy as a practice contrary to the international evolution of the recognition of children's rights and of women's rights. On the other hand, if you read the minority report, the report of the leftist parties against the law, albeit with exceptions, it leaves us appalled. This minority report, that also reflects the positions held by left-wing intellectuals and women who self-identify as feminists in the public debate, is based on a manipulation of the principle of women's freedom of self-determination. It calls into question women's right to choose about their bodies by extracting it from the objective circumstances of economic vulnerability that determine women's choice to lend themselves to surrogacy. It speaks of guarantees that have already been shown to be fallacious, where there is a commercial interest involving the exploitation of the body, and above all, this minority leftist report confuses free determination with the cession of women's rights to control their bodies to a third party. This stance that was reivindicated as a leftist stance in the parliament and from intellectual and self-identified feminist left outside the parliament fits perfectly into the quote, myth of free choice, as defined by Spanish philosopher Ana de Miguel, a myth that, ignoring power structures, cover exploitation with a call to freedom. Another issue addressed by the Meloni government is May violence against women. Last March, the government introduced a bill on feminicide. At the moment, it's under scrutiny of the Justice Committee of the Senate. Let us start with that. The Italian Constitution of 1948 recognizes the equality of the sexes, but this did not prevent legal regulations discriminating against women for more than 30 years. For example, until the end of the 60s, Italian penal code stipulated that adultery was a crime and punished women and men differently. Until 1975, Italian civil law, the family law in it, enshrined the superiority of men. Until 1981, the penal code included penalties that were reduced in the case of honor killings. Despite this, the narrative built around the Italian legal system is that of a subject of a law, concept that derived from the French Revolution, that is not sexed. This idea has already been challenged precisely because it does not consider the fundamental power structures between men and women. The point is that the neutral legal subject was vindicated when, once formal equality was achieved in 1980s, attempts started to sexualize this subject in order to counter discrimination against women. For example, when in the mid-1990s new electoral laws were introduced to favor women's presence in political representation, the Constitutional Court rejected those laws, saying that it was not permissible to make the need for balance explicit. It was necessary to amend the Constitution in the early 2000s and thus provide for a constitutional obligation to promote equal access to public office for women, so that the electoral equality laws could be enacted. In addition, this must be done using a language that is, in any case, neutral. For example, I quote just an example, neither sex may be on the electoral list for more than percentage. Thus, without making explicit the fact that it is the female sex that is constantly underrepresented. Again, in 2013, a law was enacted that was described as a law on gender-based violence. It has in the title gender-based violence, but which really is more a law on domestic violence, since it does not make explicit in the articles the fact that the aggressor is a man and the victim a woman, differently from what the law about gender-based violence of Spain of 2004 does. Consequently, a bill like the one prepared by the Meloni government, this bill about feminicide, which not only names women and provides for feminicide as a crime in its own right, but also recognizes feminicide as a form of discrimination against women, will be a breakthrough in our legal system. However, albeit we can positively assess this bill, at least in its basic meaning, I will not dwell on some points that are, in my opinion, open to criticism, there are other worrying proposals. There is another bill currently being examined by the Senate Justice Committee that is very worrying, that not only demonstrates the prejudice against women of the current majority, the current right side majority, but also hinders the prevention of gender-based violence. It is a bill that would impose a mandatory 50-50 sharing of child custody between parents in case of separation or divorce. What is the problem? The child is treated as a co-owned object without taking into account his or her need for a stable environment in which to live, and situations of gender-based violence neither are taken into account. Father denounced or even convicted of gender-based violence would then, despite this, be entitled to share custody of his children with his female partner or ex-partner. This is already happening in Italy due to a law that already proposed this model in 2006, a model which now will be tightened by this new bill. children are used by violent men as a weapon against the victims. This new bill would even provide for a mandatory family mediation, even if mediation is explicitly prohibited by Article 48 of the Istanbul Convention because it is detrimental to the women victims of violence, of gender-based violence. It will provide for giving the child to one parent if the other does not comply with the terms of joint custody or, quote, artfully creates obstacles. And this is a way of introducing into our legal system a recognition of parental alienation syndrome, which is already used in Italian courts to take children away from their mothers, even though it has been delegitimized several times by the Supreme Court of Cassation. We cannot think of acting politically against feminicide on the one hand, and on the other hand, approve a law that allows violent men to blackmail and harm their female partners through the abduction of their children, undermining the prevention of gender-based violence from the very foundation. The last issue that I address is the subject of transgenderism. The law, the Italian law on the subject, which dates to 1982, does not speak of gender but sex. What changes in documents in Italy is the sex. That means that the person is, to all intents and purposes, legally the sex that is recognized by the identity document. The 1982 law spoke of rectification, whereby a person is given a different sex, legal sex, from that stated in the birth certificate. But that could only happen in the past as a result of intervening changes in his or her sexual characteristics. The change of the sex in ID required, and still requires, a decision of a court. The courts allowed the transition in the past, only following a body change. One important thing, the 1982 law did not specify the reason for permitting this sex adjustment, nor did it mention the root motivation for requesting this change. Now, the Constitutional Court, in a decision of 2015, that contains a reference to another sentence of 1985. In this case, the case of 2015, it was a case of a female to male transition, ruled that the 1982 law is constitutional, but beware. It says that surgical treatment constitutes only a possible instrument, not a mandatory one. So, according to the 2015 decision, what is the requirement for the court to recognize, a sex change? The requirement is a path of transition which must cover the psychological, behavioral, and physical aspects that combine to make up the gender identity. In 2017, the Constitutional Court told that self-ID can't be introduced at the moment. The problem with this ruling of 2015 that talks about a path of transition, which must cover the psychological, behavioral, and physical aspect combined to make up the gender identity. The problem is that not only it recognizes gender identity, but links it to constitutionally protected rights. This ruling expresses highly problematic concepts. Sex and gender are confused and used interchangeably. The ruling speaks of people who have adopted the behavior of the other sex. It affirms the conception of sex as a complex part of the personality determined by a set of factors, the balance of which must be sought, privileging the dominant ones. We are thus in full defense of sexist stereotypes and even of the idea that sex is a spectrum measurable in greater or lesser femininity and masculinity. Thus, the ruling enshrines in our legal system the idea that being a woman or a man corresponds to a series of stereotypes and establishes that legal sex change must take place according to the degree of adherence to femininity or masculinity. Must take place in case of a request. Furthermore, there is a total and complete indifference to the asymmetry in which women and men live. The issue, by this ruling of 2015, is treated as if the male-to-female or female-to-male transition had the same social consequences. The ruling only takes into account the desire of the individual, without evaluating the impact, for example, on equality policies, which in Italy are extremely poor, but which are nevertheless affected by this choice. It is true that the recurrent of a court ruling makes the transition less arbitrary than self-ID, and as I said, excluded by the Constitutional Court in 2017, and reduces the dimension of the phenomenon compared to other countries. However, this does not change the fact that in this way, deeply sexist and patriarchy-denying principles have become entrenched in our legal system. Above all, the overlapping of sex and gender is appalling, and as it is also the total disavowal of gender as an instrument of oppression and its recognition instead as an identity. Furthermore, abuses exist and are evident. For example, we have, I give you only an example, the participation in the Paris Paralympic Games of an Italian male athlete legally recognized as a woman, thus depriving female athletes of opportunities. On a positive note, we must recall that in October 2021, the Italian Senate blocked the so-called DDL Zan, a bill strongly supported by the Partito Democratico and the larger part of the left, not only the left, for example, also was supported by Movimento 5 Stelle, and it was entitled the title, Measures to Prevent and Combat Discrimination and Violence on Grounds of Sex, Gender, Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Disability. What was the problem with this bill? Basically two. The first is that it would have reinforced a strongly sexist and misogynistic concept in our legal system. For example, again, gender is defined as the, quote, outward manifestation of a person that conforms to or contrasts with social expectation related to sex, without taking into account the political significance it has as an instrument of oppression of women and the asymmetry that exists between women and men concerning gender. Everything is traced back to individual feeling, to an identity perceived and manifested by the individual. The second problem is that the bill would have provided for criminal conviction for, quote, acts of discrimination, also related to gender identity, and would have established the prohibition of, I quote, any organization, association, movement, or group whose aims include incitement to discrimination, end quote. It is crystal clear how easily it would have been to brand radical feminism as discriminatory and to bring it to a court under the criminal measures proposed by the law for not accepting transidentified males as women. Furthermore, the Article 4 of this bill apparently saved the freedom of expression, but not if the opinion, I quote, were suitable to determine the concrete danger of the perpetration of discriminatory acts. Again, if considering a transidentified male as a man is assessed as discriminatory, the guarantees would have been lost. In conclusion, we see that we face two problems. The first is that of a country where the legal system does not sufficiently take into account the historical oppression of women, hiding behind the neutrality of the legal subject and the purely formal concept of equality, and even protecting sexist stereotypes. On the other hand, the current presence of political forces that do not guarantee women's rights, they are the right that beyond some specific issues such as surrogacy remains linked to conception of the family that favors the power of father and husband, even in context of violence. I haven't speak of abortion because at the moment is not a hot topic, but the rights doesn't favor the exercise of the right to abortion. And the left has adopted a postmodern vision based on the myth of free choice, and which denies the oppression of women as a sexual class. That doesn't mean that we should renounce decisive interaction with the institution. Talk with the institution, try to cooperate work with the institution and push the institution to our side, regardless of the political force governing them at any given time. But we can't say that we have really effort that is really in favor of women's rights, above all, women sex-based rights. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Silvia. That was incredibly comprehensive roundup in just 25 minutes or 20 minutes of the situation in Italy, and also the political situation, the parties and the law. And then it was so interesting you going into how it's happening and how it's playing out. I really thought it was helpful, some of the concepts you were sharing with us, like the asymmetry of transition and the deeply sexist and patriarchy denying concepts, and then protecting sexist stereotypes. And then another phrase you used, which was amazing, was great, was the denying the oppression of women as a sex class. If it's possible to share the words of your speech with us, I would really like to put them on our website, because I think that a lot of the phrases are very clear. They come very well in English, and they really clarify the problem we have now, where even, I mean, in Britain, now that they have said sex is biological, we still have all of these postmodern equality-based laws and sort of norms in our institutions which deny the oppression of women as a sex class, as you say. We don't have any questions at the moment. But I suppose I would say, can I ask just one, and then we'll come back at the end? What is the resistance at the moment to these gender identity ideologies, or this postmodern viewpoint, equality viewpoint?
There is a little resistance. I say little because radical feminists are not many in Italy. We have a radical feminist, but we had some success. For example, the parliament some months ago gave the authority for the protection of the children to Marina Terragni, that is a radical feminist, and she can look at try to protect in a better way the rights of children, above all from transitions, and even in case of this bill of shared custody. She already spoke to the parliament about this issue. There are also some organizations that are rooted, for example, in the socialist and communist past that are skeptical of transgenderism, but the feminism in the streets, the marches, for example, are governed by associations that are more trans feminist. So there is a mass or a huge quantity of women and girls that recognize themselves in trans feminism. And this is a problem because they are very present in March, for example, the March for the International Women's Day. So the resistance is a little distant, but that has a good capacity to resonate itself with institution, as in the case of the nomination to the Children's Authority of Marina Terragni.
So we're now going to go to our next speaker, who is Angela Wild. She is from Wild Women Workshop, which is a fantastic creative venture, most famous for the T-shirt this witch doesn't burn that J.K. Rowling started wearing and promoting, but also for just fantastic artwork, and also has done amazing theoretical work as well. So Angela, thank you so much for coming on. Can you tell us what is Wild Women Workshop?
It's a shop for radical feminist activists, not the fun kind. There aren't that many around. And I just thought I'd create and, sell items that feminists might find nice, interesting, useful, or funny. So yeah, I work with images such as witches, because really they are the archetype of women resisting and just have been there all along and will carry on being here as our TERFs. I work on a little bit of like man-hating, let's say. I also include obviously anti-porn, anti-surrogacy work, and TERF, and I work also a lot of images on goddesses, because I think it's really important to, whether we are spiritual or not, that there is a female representation of, the divine. And because I think also art created with spirituality, that we go back to, images of us as powerful goddesses. Yes, and then some gender critical, as some say, or rather gender hostile items like this. And I really wanted Wild to reflect my politics. And I wanted the name to reflect my politics. So wild comes from the Mary Daly definition of wild, and it's basically not tamed or domesticated, not associated with men, uncontrollable, ungovernable. The Mary Daly definition is amazing. I just thought it was so inspiring. That's what I wanted to be. And also the word women with a Y. I'm asked very often, why is it spelled like that? The Y, the women with a Y, it's an alternative spelling of the word woman used by feminists. And it's really also a reference to the second wave, where women started to talk about language and man-made language, and by using the alternative and not having the word man in woman, it shows a sign of independence. So I really wanted that to be reflected, like the real radical feminism in it.
How long has the workshop been going?
I started in 2017. And I started because I couldn't find what I was looking for. Again, going back to the second wave, I remember, no, I don't remember, but because I wasn't there, but reading books, and references, it seemed to have been like a lot of culture and a lot of badges. And I was like, where are the feminist badges? And in 2017, there were not anything radical on the market. There were not anything that I could wear if I went to demo that represented my politics. So that's yeah, I started with badges, basically.
And what's the aim?
It's important that a movement, a political movement of resistance, has like several aspects to it, and providing a visual identity for the movement is really, really important. I always had in mind the suffragettes who were so very visibly branded and clear when you knew who they were just by looking at them. And I thought it was really important to have, merch where we can recognize each other in the crowd. We are identifiable to each other. When you're in the street and you see somebody with a t-shirt, and you just know that even if you don't know her, she's on your side. So I brought the suffragette theme colors in 2019. Nobody was doing that at the time. I also brought the idea of the witch as the new TERF back in the day. So these ideas, like the suffragette and the witch as a rebel TERF, as a feminist, are now entirely part of that movement, for example. And I thought that was really important. The second really important thing is that I thought, I'm going to use a word that a lot of liberals use, but empower. Because I've had a lot of women saying to me, I bought a badge, I don't wear it, or I wear it inside my jacket. That's at the beginning of the movement of the TERF, finding each other. And I've never done a demo, I've never spoken up or anything. And I've got this badge, and then I find myself in the supermarket heckling my MP. And, the idea that I have in my pocket, or I've got a t-shirt underneath that is an item of dissent, that I know I carry a movement with me, gave me courage. I've got a lot of women who said that to me. And I thought, like, badges are a getaway kind of drug to more radical action. To me, they really carry a lot of power. And also because patriarchy bans little items like stickers, it seems ridiculous, but there's been so many press around stickers. If you think about it, it's a few centimeters of fabric or a few centimeters of paper where, you just express something that is different, that is dissident, and it's really powerful, really, in a patriarchy. So, yeah, cultural resistance, I think, is as important as bringing legal challenges. We have a rich movement. We have a movement with women with loads of skills. They come from their life and bring these skills and this expertise, into the movement. And this is what I've got. I've got visual culture, so I'll bring that. So that's fairly new. I worked on a very, very long project that is a hand-drawn coloring book. It's Radical Feminist inspired, and it's a witch's book. And I hand-drawn everything. So I want to say I don't use AI. I do everything by hand, and that was a long product of love, and I'm really proud of it. So I wanted to show that. I've got this one as well. So that I came here to speak about the action No Man Beyond This Point, which I run, around Hampstead Heath and several times in the UK. I also sell the tape because I thought it's a really useful product, like an activist tool that you can have in your bag. And because women have asked me, can we have the tape? So the tape is really cheap, and you can buy meters of them and set up your women's space wherever you are. So, practical, as well as, nice. Next one is, so that is, I'm also doing art print. So I'm doing a lot of merch, but I'm also doing some art, and these are handmade. And they are basically, they say, join your local tough gang. Again, that's a reference to the witches and the resistance of women. And they are hand painted and hand printed. So they're completely unique pieces. And you'll be able to see that in London in a couple of weeks at Women Create, because I'm showing them there. And this one, I have been really very worried about the rise of Trump and the very right-wing, the pro-natalist, racist movement. And I wanted to really, really strongly say that, you can be anti-gender ideology and you can also be anti-Trump. And yes, and there's loads of us around. So
where do you get your inspiration for your new designs?
There's two things, One thing is when I've left Twitter now for, ideological reason and for my mental health, but a lot of the time, for many years, the inspiration came from the opposition. So, you would have, it would be really the act of reclaiming, when you get called something and then you reclaim it, so you make it lose its power. So I've used that on a visual way. And all the way since, 2018 and onwards, I've started using words that were used against us to create items. So there was a journalist that said that J.K. Rowling joined the wrong crowd. I made a T-shirt. Somebody said that lesbians were part of an international network of powerful lesbians. I made a T-shirt. And recently there was this actor who, oh God, the name escapes me. I don't pay attention to men very much, but he called us Gargoyle of Beelzebub, and I made a T-shirt. The idea was, to just do that very, very quickly, because I can design quickly, and to just this, how do you say, remove the power out of the slur, because it really, if you remember at the beginning, being called a TERF was very scary. And I think for some women it still is scary, but it's lost I think it's lost its silencing power, at least in the UK, because we've used it to say, well, actually, yeah, I am a TERF, so what are you going to do about it? And that was one of the things I've been doing for a very long time. But the second thing is really, from the beginning, I am women-centered. And I think feminism in general, and even my art, because of that, reaction to opposition, has been too reactive. And I really think we should be creating more the things we want, the word we want, the artwork we want, rather than being against patriarchy. Let's be for women. Let's create what we need. So I'm trying to now integrate more women-centered product and visual in general.
Can you tell us about when J.K. Rowling reposted about your T-shirt. What impact did that have on your shop and on your spirit?
It was 4 years ago, and I received a text by somebody because I was outside having a walk. I didn't look at my phone, and somebody said, "Oh my God, just look at Twitter!" And so she had shared a picture of her with my T-shirt that says, "Sometimes the T-shirt just speaks to you," and then linked to the shop. So I had the most massive rush of orders I've ever experienced. And I have to say, Jo, I had a little mental breakdown because I cannot cope with this. I'm not Amazon, it was me. So how do I deal with this? And I freaked out because I couldn't print the orders fast enough, let alone preparing them. I was like, oh my God, I had no kind of structure in place to deal with such a thing. I remember going to the post office with trolleys twice a day, trolleys full to the top of orders, and I made a few not friends in the local post office because it was just completely crazy. I think in the first 2 days I received 1,000 orders, so it was really insane, and it really changed my life because yeah, I mean, it was incredible. Then he messaged. No, I wrote a letter to Jo to thank her because it did have such an impact on me, and then I was invited for lunch, so that was nice.
You do custom design. Can you tell us about that?
I mean, for years, in fact, what happened is that I've received requests for women saying, "Oh, would you do a logo for me? Would you do an illustration? Would you do some work?" And I have declined all the time. I was like, no, I didn't feel that this was for me. I've had an experience, as a graphic designer in an agency, which was terrible. And I just really didn't want to do it. And in fact, recently I had several very good experiences. And I thought, actually, yes, I'm going to say yes to that. This is really a great opportunity, because really what I want to do is to communicate more with women. And also, I want to step away from that rush of doing not orders, but design very, very quickly. When you work with a client, so, if somebody came to me today, we would develop a product together, we develop a project together, I'll get to understand what they are doing and how they want their image to be. And that's my job to transfer that into an image, and I'm really, really enjoying it. The last few projects I've had were just really, really wonderful. I can't show them to you all because they're not released yet, but yes.
Why did you decide to go in that direction?
I think I've kind of really tried to answer that. I think I'm looking for a bit of a slower, deeper way of working, a bit more intentional. I'm going to carry on the merch side because I really enjoy it too. It's really satisfying to have women wear your design. I love it, but I like the process of working with someone as well, and I think it's really enriching. So.
You mentioned the Women Create. Are you going to be there as well?
I might not physically make it, but I'm in 2 panels. I will be speaking on cancel culture, and I will be speaking on the challenges and joys of being an artist and a working class woman. But I'm also showing 2 things there. So I'll be showing the tough gang that you've seen, which are lino cuts. And also, I'm going to be showing the No Man Beyond This Point that will be on display as well. And I think it'll be really interesting if there are some audience who are not feminists to go and experience, what it's like to be excluded if you're a man from that space. I'm looking forward to that.
I'm very pleased to introduce Blandine Deverlanges. She's a feminist activist. She stands against gender ideology and the sex trade. She's co-founder of WDI France, Les Amazon d'Avignon. She defends women's rights, freedom of speech, and the power of female solidarity. Through action and words, Blandine fights patriarchal violence and censorship. And thank you so much for coming on to talk to us today, and over to you.
What is happening to me is not an isolated case. It's a symptom of a more disturbing phenomenon that concerns all women, especially feminists, who refuse to submit to the ideological demands of gender ideology. A few weeks ago, the fourth, please. A few weeks ago, an anonymous letter was sent to my school principal. I am a teacher. And the letter accused me in extremely harsh terms of being transphobic. My alleged crime, signing in 2020 an article with, which questions the concept of gender identity and its consequences for women's rights. We were 140 feminists, some well-known, some other-known, who signed this article. And the letter begins as follows. I am sending you this very serious email because I discovered that Blandine Deverlanges signed a transphobic and extremely violent column toward trans people in 2020. And it continues, such a position is scandalous, extremely violent, complicit in a criminal and illegal ideology. So feminism is illegal. And it goes even further. I am compared to the far right associated with activists whose political stance I don't share. And the author of the letter demands that my institution take urgent protective measures against me. In short, they are demanding I be fired. And 5, please. This letter, of course, is anonymous. It's a classic intimidation tactic. I am speaking out today because these kinds of methods are becoming widespread. It's a part of a broader campaign of harassment against gender critical feminists, a campaign that is organized, systemic, and always targets the same people. Women who dare to think differently, to defend a certain vision of feminism, rooted in reality, in materiality, in women's lived experiences as an oppressed social class. And I also speak because this letter says something about our times. It reveals how certain topics have become untouchable, how the mere idea of debating, of asking questions, of offering a critical analysis that has become suspect and even dangerous. That's where we are now. Asking questions has become subversive, and thinking differently is seen as a threat. Well, no. I refuse this logic of permanent suspicion. I reject this censorship, disguised in moral vigilance, and I refuse to remain silent. That's why I have chosen to respond publicly, to affirm my fundamental right, the right to think, to express and to debate. No intimidation will take this right away from me. Because feminism is gender critical. Let's talk now about this infamous article. Yes, I signed it. Yes, I stand by it. No, I don't apologize, because believe it or not, in a democracy, signing a column is not a crime. It's a fundamental right. So, what is this so-called scandalous text that makes me unfit for any role in education? It's a feminist text that asks, is it enough to self-declare as a woman to be considered one? A simple question that has apparently become unacceptable. And today, it's a tough thought crime. And what that column says, and what I repeat here, is that feminism, by definition, is a critique of gender. Gender is not a magical inner identity. Gender is a social structure of domination, a hierarchy imposed between the sexes in favor of men. And that's what we fight against, because that's what feminists do. We do not fight against people. We do not say that some lives are worthless than others. We say that women's rights as a sexually oppressed class are non-negotiable. This is not rejection, it's political lucidity. Yet today, a new dogma prevails. Suppose gender identity would take precedence over biological sex. Personal feelings will become more real than reality itself. A man could, by simple declaration, become a woman. And women are not only expected to accept this, but to applaud, integrate, support, and validate it. without question, without resistance? Well, no. I am one of those who ask questions. One of those who, like you, worry, for example, about seeing men self-identify as women and gain access to women-only spaces, women's sport competition, or official positions as women without ever having experienced any sex-based oppression. And I ask this question, was it left for women if we erase their material reality? You see, it's not that violent. It's not even radical. It's feminist common sense, classic feminism. The feminism of Beauvoir, of Wittig, of concrete struggles. But nowadays, saying that gets you labeled as a TERF. In reality, it's a slur meant to shame any woman who dares to say that no, a man does not become a woman by declaration. It's a weapon of mass silencing. No one contradicts you. You are cancelled. TERF, transphobe, warphobe, fascist, while we are at it. And if you persist, they send a letter to your employer. It's not about discussion. It's about silencing, excluding, punishing. Well, no, I won't be silenced. Because what I defend is the very possibility of discussions, of existing politically as a woman, of thinking, of disagreeing, and of continuing to speak without risking my job. I am not transphobic. I am not hateful. I am a feminist. And as such, I refuse to let women's rights be erased. Next, I am 13, please. I am accused, I am attacked, I am insulted. This letter reveals a troubling authoritarian drift disguised as a progressive virtue. First, the political insult, the magic word that makes the powerful and the careerist shudder, TERF. TERF is the latest version of which. No need to argue anymore, just label and there you are, ready to be burnt. Then amalgamation. That sweet paranoid tune that rhythm feminism with fascism. In this delusional logic, criticizing gender means playing into the hands of the far right. As if thinking of for yourself were suspicious. As if women didn't have the right to set boundaries. As if defending women's rights was already betraying the progressive cause. One can hardly believe it. Then come guilt by association. An age-old method. You sign a text with others, no matter what you say, you will be held accountable for everything these others have said, thought, or liked on Twitter since 2012, and will ever sign in the future. It's the 2.0 version of the witch trial. You are complicit by contact, by atmosphere, by osmosis. It's convenient. It avoids discussing the substance. And last but not least, anonymity and the call for professional lynching. Anonymous campaigns aimed at getting you fired, silenced, or erased. This is not activism. This is organized harassment. It's a weapon of cowards and zealots, and it's profoundly undemocratic. But I am not the only target. These attacks go beyond my person. They target all those who dare to speak differently and refuse to recite the gender catechism, all those who believe that women have the right to exist and to say so. What has earned me this witch hunt is in reality not an article signed 5 years ago, in 2020, which in the scale of digital controversies feel like it belongs to the last century. I signed that article. I stand by it and I maintain it. But then why this letter now? Why this sudden discovery of a 5-year-old text? Is it really the article that's the problem? Or is it who I am, what I say, what I have been doing for the last 5 years, expressing myself clearly, without filters, without fear? Let me tell you plainly, if I disturb, it's because I am abolitionist of gender and sexual exploitation. And I say it loudly and clearly, with argument, with facts, with testimonies. And above all, I do not remain silent. What they reproach me is not a text, but a trajectory. They reproach me for having created the podcast, maybe you know it, Rebelles du Genre, a space where women speak out in French to share the violence they suffer because of trans activism, threats, exclusions, pressures, silencing. Stories that you want to hear, but that must still be listened to. This podcast is a valuable archive of our times when feminists must risk their job just to ask questions. These voices disturb because they break the official narrative, because they show that there is a human, social, political cost to this ideology. They also reproach me for co-founding WDI France, the French branch of Women's Declaration International, which defends women's sex-based rights, to gather women around a materialist feminism, a feminism that does not confuse sex and identity, and that continues to call a spade a spade. Women are a social class based on sex, and gender is a system of oppression that must be abolished and not celebrated. And that's not all. I also had the audacity to create the group Les Amazones d'Avignon in 2019, a group of radical feminist activists who are not afraid to confront sexist violence, the industries of sexual exploitation, and new ideological injunctions. A group that exists, organizes, acts, and refuses to bow down. A group that was present every single day at the trial of the 51 rapists of Gisèle Pellicot, which took place here in Avignon from September to December, and during which we demonstrated what it means to be a feminist, fighting relentlessly, supporting the victim in court every day, every single day I was there, and putting up slogans in the streets to support her every night. We are not in the plush silence of power. We are in the streets, on the walls, in the actions. Maybe that's the real problem. We are visible. And visible women scare people. I was there because feminism is not Instagram posts on social medias. It's actions. It's women standing tall while others try to make them fall. It's the persistent, sometimes silent, but always powerful presence alongside those who are being erased. I have never seen the authors of this letter, either in the court lobby or on the support benches, neither outside nor inside. Where courage was needed, there were only absentees. So yes, it's a lot of audacity, a lot of free speech, a lot of militant sisterhood, and apparently that's too much for some. Because it's not debate they want, it's silence. Yours, mine, ours. They want a well-behaved feminism, one that stays quiet when told women don't exist. They want us to applaud while our rights, our words, our struggles are erased. But I'm not here to please. I'm here to fight. That's why I am being harassed. What they want is to silence me. What they cannot stand is that I speak, that I think, that I fight, and that I do so without shame. And since they cannot attack me head-on on the substance, they send an anonymous letter to my employer. 5 years after an article published in a magazine trying to hit me where it hurts my professional life. Because that's always the target of violence against women, their autonomy, their independence. This harassment is not isolated. It's a part of a much larger climate where all gender-critical feminists are watched, hunted, defamed, threatened. We are insulted, excluded from activist spaces, censored on social media, accused of the worst intentions. They do not debate with us. They criminalize us. Personally, I was excluded from the association where I was active, Oser le Féminisme, for speaking out publicly on this topic. What's quite ironic in this story is that although the feminist is gender critical, but the women who now run the organization are so afraid of trans activists that they prefer to attack their most vocal activists to silence them and avoid attracting the wrath of these men who want to be better women than we are. In other words, complicity to be spared. The famous right-wing women of the working. This climate of ideological harassment has profound consequences on freedom of speech, on the professional and personal lives of the women involved, but also on society as a whole. Because what is at stake here is not only the fate of one activist or group, it is the very possibility of debating, thinking, and building a society where pluralism and disagreement can coexist. The fear of denunciation, many women activists and intellectuals choose not to express themselves publicly on these issues anymore. They censor themselves, withdraw from social networks, avoid debates, and refuse invitations. It's no coincidence that most critical gender pieces today are published under pseudonyms or signed collectively to dilute responsibility and avoid retaliation. This climate of fear and censorship has a deleterious effect on feminist thought itself. It impoverishes the debate, forbids nuance, and freezes positions. It turns disagreements into existential conflicts, divergence into betrayals, and criticisms into aggressions. It prevents the construction of a living, pluralistic feminism, one that can renew itself and adapt to the challenges of the time. But it has also concrete, material consequences on the lives of the women affected. Threats, insults, defamation campaigns, pressure on employers, exclusions from associations, family or friendly breakups. The price to pay for daring to think differently is often very high. Many women have lost their jobs, their networks, their mental health, their safety. Some have had to move, change jobs, give up activism. Others keep going, but at what price? This harassment is not just the work of a few isolated individuals or radical groups. It is relayed, amplified, and legitimized by institutions, media, political parties, unions, and associations. It's a part of a broader movement of repression against dissenting thoughts, ideological normalization, and social control. And in the long run, it threatens the very possibility of a lively and pluralistic democracy. What I am defending here and now is not just only my own case, or even that of gender critical feminists. It's the very possibility of thinking, debating, and existing politically as women. I refuse to remain silent in the face of intimidation and censorship. It's not a piece of writing that disturbs them, but the fact that women continue to fight, to speak, to think, and no one can take that away from us. I want to say to all those who recognize themselves in this fight, to all those who hesitate, who doubt, who are afraid, you are not alone. We are many, we are strong, we are legitimate. We have the right to ask questions, to defend our rights, to refuse absurd demands or intimidation. We have the right to exist, to speak, to fight, to dream of a more just, more free, more equal world. I also want to remind those who sometimes out of fear, conformity, or weariness remain silent or turn away. Silence is never neutral. It always benefits the powerful, the oppressors, the censors. Daring to speak, daring to resist, daring to disobey is already a victory. It's the condition for any emancipation, for all social transformation. Finally, I want to affirm with strength and serenity that freedom of speech is non-negotiable. It's a condition for all democratic life, all progress, all justice. It must be defended every day through speech, writing, and collective actions. This is what I am doing today and now, and this is what I will continue to do, whatever the cost. Thank you for your attention, for your listening, for your solidarity. Dear sisters, let's keep fighting, thinking, and speaking for us and for all.
Can you tell us about your podcast, Blandine?
I created with a few other feminists, but now I am alone. In maybe it was 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago. And my podcast is a way to, to make an archive and to make women be heard. So we only give the microphone to women. It's women only, even too. Women who have been touched by gender identity, whatever the problem is. It can be the transitioners, mothers, teachers. Sometimes it's women in sport, or so. I have heard hundreds of women with this podcast, and I have published 105 testimonies that are available in French on our YouTube channel. You can hear them, and we have everything is written too, because I think there are 3 aims. The first is that we are being silenced, so it's a way for women to be able to speak. And the other thing is that what they have to say, what we have to say, has to be heard, and it's very useful. I have had many people writing me, parents, for example, or women that decided to go back when they heard what they heard,
Yeah.
because you have to hear the truth, Yeah. So we live in such, like a second dimension, not the reality. So in my podcast, it's a reality.
We've got Amparo Domingo. She is WDI rep for Spain. She's going to do a report from Bilbao on feminist event in reaction to conference promoting trans in kids.
So this is the room, and I wanted to tell you that the international conference, I'm just writing the name in the chat, was organized by an organization called NICEN, which is sort of mermaids. It's like mermaids. They have reasonable, scientific, evidence-based. They called it First International Conference, NICEN, Trans Children and Youth, and quote unquote, underpinning support with knowledge. The report we had from the conference, which lasted 2 days, it was held here in Bilbao last Monday and Tuesday. They were always mentioning love and affection and how they felt, and because there was no science there. So the feminists organized this event as a response, and the name is Breaking the Myth, Reconquering Reality, which is happening today. Feminists from all over Spain have come to be with our sisters in Bilbao. They were very grateful because here the situation is quite dire. The Basque Country has been captured completely ideologically. It's a situation similar to Catalonia or Scotland, so you can understand this organization I was telling you about, NICEN, is very linked, is very powerful. They get a lot of money in grants from the government, so they have a lot of money to spend in propaganda, in advertisements. So they are depicted as the heroes of the movie, so to say, the ones that are helping children in distress. And so they play this kind card. So we feminists, the event had 2 parts. This morning we were at a public place, at a park, in inspiration of Let Women Speak events. So we were at the park, and we were there greeted, and that's the other side. So you can see there at the other side of the park, separated from us by the police because they wanted to prevent us from talking, but the feminist organizers were organizing. They called the police, so you can see the police is there, and the colors of the trans flag, and they were chanting, they were playing music very loud. They didn't want us to go on. They called us fascists, and they had a slogan. They had a man with a loudspeaker saying that without trans women there is no feminism. That was their mantra. This is our side. We were outnumbered, so it was a good thing that the police was there, because we had been in trouble. They could have been violent. There were two very young women that came to our side apparently to listen, but I ended up insulting feminists and calling us fascists and making, signs with our fingers and all that. So but we were there. The sign is in Spanish, but I think everyone understands that sex is not gender. It's the meaning of the manner. And women were talking freely, handing over the microphone. As I said, it was an event inspired in Let Women Speak. Everyone said what they wanted. We're going to have panels. The teachers, the organization is here. The healthcare workers are here. So different feminist organizations are talking about the impact of trans laws in childhood and young people. So this is the event. We're focusing also on young people, as the trans activist event was. We are the counterparting the event from Monday and Tuesday, and that's all.